So,
Soft sticks.
what is the Ripples program?
You know, it's interesting. We were sitting around talking about customer service training and what it meant to us and what is hospitality. And, you know, what I noticed was just the group of people sitting around the table. And it struck me that, you know, it really is just how we treat each other, that it's the culture of Watermark, that it's not this thing we have to do and not a training program we have to, you know, roll out. It's more of just a celebration of who we are and how we treat each other. So that was a big turning moment in the, you know, the creation of the Ripples program was shifting away from, you know, thinking it was something we had to infuse rather than just something to celebrate in our culture.
So, you would say that it exists in your culture, in Watermark culture right
I do. I think we can do a better job of recruiting into it. I think we can do a better job of celebrating the stories. You know, but we're in a profession where people typically work in retirement communities because they want to serve, that they have that kind of in their DNA. And that I think our job is to spread those stories, you know, really more promote the culture of which these stories, you know, ripple throughout the entire organization.
now? So, is Ripples about serving, or is it about connecting? What is the what is the nature of the relationship?
I think Ripples is really about just being present. And it's so easy for us in our day to day tasks to simply walk by another human being and not take the moment to see how they're doing, what's going on for their, you know, from their in their day. How can we just take a moment and pause and celebrate them as human beings, find out if they have a need that's unmet. It's just moving away from, you know, tasks to really connecting with people.
Where do you see the impact of the Ripples program? For instance, hiring, training, teaming, performance reviews. Where does this express in Watermark?
Well, I think there's a couple of different perspectives that Ripples is trying to address. One is, you know, if we recruit into it, meaning you really select your associates that already have that in their DNA to, you know, be present, to interact with human beings on a different level, then it becomes much easier to kind of have the culture continue to manifest itself. But as leaders, you also have to take a stand. So if you've got people who don't come from that perspective and aren't interested in playing at the level that we want to play at Watermark, you know, you have to really actively work to coach those individuals, or in some cases, you know, just realize that, you know, they're not the right person to be part of your culture, and that they would be far more successful maybe in a different culture. So I think it's part is selecting, and I think part of it is, you know, retaining, in acknowledging the people who are really part of your culture, and, you know, very candidly, you know, finding another culture for someone else who's not consistent with what you're trying to accomplish. And then I think it manifests itself everywhere. When you walk into a Watermark building that really embodies, you know, the Ripples culture, you can just kind of feel it. There's a sense of when you walk in the front door that something's slightly different here. And again, I think our job as leaders is to share those stories and not just have them ripple inside the, you know, the community of which they're being born, but, you know, ripple throughout the whole organization.
Yeah, so it's really more about taking what already exists and recognizing it and showing everyone what's there.
Right.
Making sure people understand that what they do has impact further than this immediate moment.
Yeah, I think Ripples is really an intentional way of amplifying what's already in and baked into our culture, and finding a way to share those stories, to celebrate those stories, to acknowledge the people that are in our culture that do this, just as a matter of fact of who they are. I'll tell you one of my favorite stories, ripple stories from over the years is there was a resident in one of our memory care programs she was really struggling for around bathing and showering. It was a very high agitation moment for her. And one of our associates just simply sat down on the bed, side by side with her, and just said, may I brush your hair? And just sat there and brushed her hair, very lovingly, very tenderly. I'm sure for the resident, it really reminded her probably of her mother brushing her hair when she was a child. And from that, the associate just said, "Boy, it sure would be easier to brush your hair if we could wash your hair first." And this interaction was so personal and so heartfelt, and it's a story. It's probably happened 15 years ago, but that's really the nature of a ripple. It's a story we've told for decades, and it's a great example of someone just pausing their tasks for the day, connecting to a human being, and taking a very difficult situation for most staff that was very confrontational, like you must shower, you must bathe because it's on my checklist, to really changing the perspective and the spin on it, and just sitting down very tenderly with this resident and coming at it from a different perspective. That's an example of a ripple that I'll never forget.
So, do you want to talk about why hospitality doesn't fully define the Ripples program, or just talk about
Yeah, sure, Aaron. I don't think hospitality has anything to do with ripples, so that's a great question.
All right. So, why is it different than hospitality programs at spas or hotels? What makes it different, and should it be different here?
Yeah, when we sat down to kind of put this program together, we worked with many people who had come from the hospitality side of the industry. And again, just as I was going through it and we were meeting as a leadership team, it felt like we were trying to do something to associates, rather than just figure out a way to honor what they do naturally, celebrate what they do naturally. And my experience with that is, people come to work because they want to do a good job. People come to work because they want to connect with human beings. I don't know that we have to teach them to do that. I think we have to celebrate and create this environment where these stories just ripple throughout the whole organization. So that was a big shift that we took in creating this program. So we moved away from feeling like we have to train or do something to the associate so that they knew how to act or behave. They already know how to act or behave. That's why they're in this profession. And we just have this incredible opportunity to share stories, acknowledge the power of the human spirit, and create an environment where people can slow down and connect with individuals. I've got a lot more bullshit that I can I can just spew out. You just prompted, all right?
That's what this is for. And then Ricky just finds the best.
Yes, I'm sure the bullshit comment will come right into the.
What is the most important component of this program? That is, you've said it, but to say it in some way, kindness, sensitivity, connection.
Yeah, I think one of the most critical aspects of Ripples is really highlighting and celebrating the power of the human spirit when we slow down. That when we take the time to connect with the human being, to be present, fully present for that person. I've known people throughout my life that have this skill, this ability, this innate way of being. And when they sit and talk to you, they connect at such a level that it's almost deafening. Their silence is almost deafening. Like it's so present, and ironically, it feels kind of uncomfortable when someone is really, truly present for you. And I think that's something that we can practice. I think that's something that we can celebrate and really promote within our culture. It wasn't my best, but it's all right.
No, it's good actually.
Ricky can cut that. You know?
Look at him.
That's right.
No, I actually really like that concept because it's about being seen, right? It is sort of uncomfortable
Right.
because it's really wonderful to be seen, but it also forces you to be your best person,
Good.
your best self.
Is be present to yourself.
Darren, a bit, you talked about how the program began, but how did it more explicitly? Did you say we need a hospitality program, and then it became this conversation where you talked about it's not really that we need to force it? When did you decide to make this more codified than just a cultural thing? Was there something?
Starting to feel like Christmas. You know, one of the things that has shifted for us over the last 30 years is as we've grown as an organization, you do face this balance of creating structures and systems and tools and resources for the communities because you're no longer one community or three communities. Now you're 50, 60, 100 communities, and I don't really like where I'm going with that, so I'm going to stop. What was the question?
So it's really how did the program begin? What prompted it? Because this is a part of your culture, right? And it sounds like where you're going is it's a scaling issue.
Right.
You want to say it a different way. But what you've talked about the leadership team sitting around and saying, well, it doesn't need to be this top-down thing. It's about celebrating. Well, why are we having that conversation in the first place?
Yeah, I think it's as we've grown as an organization, there are a lot more ripples, which is what's really exciting about this. And the challenge we have is how do you share those ripples? So, Watermark retirement communities is spread out all over the country. And the story I told earlier about the the associate sitting down and combing the resident's hair, that happened in Florida. I heard about it in Arizona. So how do you create a structure where those ripples and those stories travel, and quite frankly, travel quickly? Because that story, quite frankly, has has that story has inspired me and made me slow down. And the more I visit that story or revisit that story, the more it reminds me of what I can do. Just leading up to this session today, there was a young woman out in the lobby, and I took the time to say hello, offer her a brownie, and ask her how her day was. And because when you're thinking or talking about a program like Ripples, it kind of forces you to never mind.
So actually,
Brownies really aren't ripples, but so.
What brownies are important?
Yeah, they are important.
Let it be
Just
known.
ask Ash.
Actually, I think it's really important that we define the relationship between a ripple and a story because I feel like there are moments in time, there are connections that happen, but those just drop. That might be a stone,
Mm-hmm.
but the ripple is the story itself. And if I may be wrong, but how would you talk about a ripple relative to the story relative to a moment in time?
Sure. So I think when you look at ripples, the stories themselves are the kind of the stone being dropped in the water. The ripple itself is really a amplification of that story that creates the culture, the movement, and the organization. So, the story of the associate who sat down and started combing, the residents' hair, that was the actual, story. Um, it was a story that created a really big ripple, a ripple that's lasted for decades now. So I view the actual, um, event or the experience that the person brings to the table as the story that then creates the ripple. And some, create bigger ripples, some have long-lasting ripples, and it really just depends on how well we celebrate those and share those.
Well, what happens if a meaningful moment happens that never gets told? There's no story that flows out.
Yeah. It's critical that these stories be told because a lot of times, and again, we're located in 21 different states, and so when these stories just become isolated and not celebrated, they don't have the impact on the culture that they can. I mean, even in their own retirement community, it might be you have a story that happens in the dining program or in the wellness program that if that story isn't even told inside the walls of that community, it doesn't create a ripple. And so that's what the whole idea behind the Ripples program is, that the stories are told, that they ripple throughout the retirement community, and then they also leave the walls of the retirement community and ripple throughout the whole Watermark organization. That was better.
That was nice.
God, it smells good too.
Yeah, I know. It's like residence delicious.
I think we got it.
I have a couple
No, we
of
don't.
questions. How excited and proud are you of this program?
I think the Ripples program, is really a way of us naming something that we've been working on for 30 years. So this has been a long journey, and it's been, to me, it's kind of personifying. It's not personifying. No, it's not that at all. What else is it? It's, I'll just start over again here. In just a moment I will, when I think about what I'm trying to say. I think the Ripples program, in many ways, is the natural evolution of our culture over the last 30 years. Is a as the leaves ripple by.
That is leaf guy.
Yep.
You're on leave too.
I think in many ways, Ripples is the natural evolution of what we've been working on for the last 30 years. Watermark's always been known to have a very strong culture, and I think Ripples is just really a formalization of being able to capture those stories and tell those stories in a way that will really amplify our culture. So I'm really proud of the work that we're doing. I've always been proud of the really talented and beautiful associates that have chosen to come work for Watermark. And I think this is a way to honor who they are, honor their stories, honor their heart, and share that in a very systemic way to celebrate that.
How do you create ripples in each of your days? So every day, how do you create a ripple? Do you just have an ethos of paying attention to people and looking people in the eye?
That's a bullshit question right there.
I don't
I think the other thing that is inspiring to me about this program is, it's challenging to slow yourself down, be present for people, and really, connect. And so I think Ripples will be a daily reminder to me personally to do exactly that. It's very easy for me to get going in 17 different directions, but if I really believe in what we're doing, and I do believe in what we're doing, it will really, I hate the word force, I don't want to say force, inspire, that's what I should have said. So, I think Ripples is a program that will have a profound impact on me personally as well. It's very easy for me to get going in 17 different directions and forget just why we're here, to slow down and connect with that person, in the hallway or in one of our communities, and just find out what's going on and how they're doing that day. That's probably more important than the 17 other tasks that I'm trying to multitask and get done for that day. So I think from that perspective, this program will have a profound impact on me personally.
So this one is a little weird actually, but I think for me it was really powerful to think about this in relationship like what you think of senior living communities or facilities as being, right? So in the historically it really wasn't known, senior living wasn't known for hospitality. It's like there was this in the 80s grotesque inhumanity in these programs. And Watermark was founded during this era, but with a radically different approach. So I wanted to know, would you say, given the historical context of senior living, would you say that hospitality, that kindness is in Watermark's DNA? And also, would you say the industry at large, I know it's sensitive to say, like, oh, everyone else is terrible. Would you say the industry has come a long way in terms of kindness, seeing people's presence, all of that?
I don't know, because I think, and I'm just going to talk, not really talk, but I think, if you look back at the 80s when we got started, it was really more about, the physical plant and the way in which we structured our work. So the physical plant was built for efficiency. So you can go into a 20 or 30-year-old facility, and you can actually, in fact, I was in one yesterday, where you can actually see it was built for efficiency and regulation, like the old spoken wheel, nursing homes, where the big nursing station is in the middle, and there's 5 hallways off the spoke of that wheel, and it was done for line of sight, so that the nurse could efficiently look down 5 different hallways for a call light. Or if you looked at how the regulatory environment impacted what we did. What we've been trying to do for the last 30 years is move away from this concept of efficiency and really look at the human spirit, and how can we deliver service in a way that's not about efficiency, but it's about that person's well-being. And I think that's the biggest shift that we've been trying to focus on for the last 30 years. Is in some cases we have challenged state regulations on how we deliver medicines, to how we dine, how we bathe, and all that, because it's it really, again, it's all about efficiency and regulatory compliance. And somewhere we lost the fact that we're caring for human beings. So in some ways that's what Ripples is about, is getting people to look at how we care about someone, not just how we care for them.
I think that's beautiful.
Do you really?
I do really actually. I think that's actually what's at the core of this program, and also Watermark, is the humanity of the residents.
Right.
They are not just numbers, and they're not just check marks. Yeah. Okay, well that was the last question I had.
And I'll tell you a story about that.
Yeah, tell me.
We were visiting a community that we were looking at potentially acquiring, and I remember walking into the assisted living portion of the community and talking to the director of nursing, in essence, and she very proudly showed me how they had the med cart flanking the nurse's station on either side. In one hall, the residents would come down, they would get their medications, they would go into the dining room, they would, then eat. So they get their medications, they'd go in, they would eat, and they were pre-selecting their menu, so that was a very efficient way to do it. And then they had the scales on the outside, the two scales on the outside. So basically you went from medication to dining to weights. And she was very proudly showing how efficient this was. And I remember just looking at it and going, and by the way, they had real top-notch regulatory licensing surveys, very few deficiencies. And she was very, very proud of it. And I remember just looking at it and going, that's exactly what we're trying to do at Watermark, is to change that whole mindset of this. It was almost like an assembly line of medicate, feed, weigh, and just really looking at it almost, like what's the most efficient way for us to get through our day. At Watermark, we're trying to turn that up on its end and say, how do we sit and connect with the human being and find out what's needed from their perspective? What makes them thrive? What's going to allow them to enjoy their best self that day, rather than us getting through a checklist of ADLs.
Can I just say some things and have you go back? So in terms of the associates, could you talk a little bit that Ripples is for the associates too? Like capture the piece that it's not just for the residents or guests, but just talk about that. Do you want me to just tell you one at a time, and then
Okay.
I'll tell you the next one, but just really talk about how.
Or just who benefits.
Right. Got it. I think the other thing too is that we've learned over the years is the act of being present. It feels like, and it's often communicated as if the benefit is over there. That if we stop and slow down and be present for that resident or whoever we're interacting with, that boy, we can really change the direction of the day for that individual. My experience is, when I slow down and I stop and actually connect with that human being, I walk away the one that's richer for the experience. So I think in many ways, Ripples is as much about us as individuals as it is the person that we're interacting or connecting with.
Yeah, you're not giving something away of yours,
Right.
and then you're less. It's a zero-sum game. It's everybody
Right.
benefits.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of studies that look at and show and demonstrate that if I'm struggling, that if I stop and help somebody else, it's like the charitable act of giving is very, very powerful for me as an individual. And I think in many ways, Ripples, accentuates that really thought of giving of myself will in turn, help me elevate my day.
Then when you were talking about how you create ripples, you were talking about it will instead of talking about ripples is already happening. So you're already, the ripples program is happening. So if you were talking about the future tense.
Oh yeah, I hate
do
that.
that part as if this is how it impacts you on a day-to-day basis.
So when did I say that?
But how do you create ripples?
How do you create ripples in your other day? You were talking about it more in futuristic, that it will help me.
Okay,
do this
gotcha.
Instead of it's doing it right now. So just redoing that question in the present
Okay.
tense.
Good catch.
Yeah.
I think the thing about Ripples that's really the most powerful and transformative thing for myself is that it forces me to kind of slow my day down and be present and connect with that human being, there. So I may have, 17 tasks on my to-do list that can get me distracted from actually just slowing down and being present. So I think that's probably the way that Ripples impacts me the most, is just that ability to share that story or actually read about someone who's created a ripple maybe in Florida that I hear about, and how that inspires me to be a better human being.
And then when you were talking about what is a ripple, I don't know, we're going to talk about it this afternoon, but do you want to incorporate the word pebble? We didn't talk about pebble. You talked about these stories. I don't know if you want to say a story or a stone or pebble. I don't know whether you want to say it again in case we're going to talk about it this afternoon. So if we do have a pebble or a stone, do you want to attach that to the story? Because you didn't mention pebble or stone.
we talked about the stone as the stone was the story. And
I think I actually, I think I avoided it actually, but I can't remember.
And I didn't hear the pebble or stone as the story. So
so what we didn't say pebble. So I was trying to hammer out because I think it can be really hard to, there's verbal equivocation, right? People don't understand what does it mean when we say ripple. How does that relate to a story? How does that relate to a pebble? Although we said stone and pebble would be better because that is our language. But just to say one more time, a pebble is this, a ripple
Hey,
is
Brenda.
this. Yes.
My Mandarin isn't all that good,
Do you want me to translate for you?
but it appears to me that you were comparing a Chinese man's beard to a
It
cactus.
was their favorite part of the tour. I am not
Excellent.
kidding. We did that take like 12 times. Like at one point I was like, I'm literally going to start to sweat because it was actually like the hottest part of the day and the sun was on us. Yeah. It's my favorite part. It's that cactus it's over there.
Yes.
It's right over there. So it's got like the long white hair.
Oh.
So
Brenda
what
is
I said was,
internationally acclaimed now.
And what I said was, I don't know the scientific name for it, and then you can't hear me because they're all right, like on top of my voice. But then I said, we call it you're fine. But we call it the old man cactus because you see that it has the beard, and so then they were like, and then do it. I'm like, do you know anyone that has a beard? Because the guy that I was telling had it.
You did.
They were so amused.
It sounds pretty normal.
Okay, leave the set, please.
Sounds like a ripple.
Sounds like.
Give her a pebble.
So the pebble, because we're talking to our associates
Yes.
about the program, so they want to know, be able to connect what a pebble is.
Yeah, so what is the act? What is the pebble? So in my mind, I think of the pebble as the act or the action. But I know you were saying the pebble is the story. And that the ripple is the
It's the
effect
telling
that
of the story.
Nice,
Yes, it's the repeated telling of the story
Yeah.
that creates the current and the
So
culture.
then you might say something like the act exists, or the act occurs, and then the pebble is the story, and then the ripple is the story.
Sounds awfully complicated.
But I think it offers a metaphor that people can connect to, that they can want to, and it defines the word.
And even if you just give it a quick mention, because you did say the event, the story, the pebble, you just even give it a quick mention and then reiterate what you did about how that then in turn causes the ripple. I just didn't hear the pebble stone, but if it was in there.
It wasn't. I think I
Okay,
was staying away from it.
Yeah, we may
For-
move away from
for
it.
this reason.
I didn't go
Could
over
almost
it.
be,
Because like you said,
think of that story as a pebble that falls in,
Wait.
creates those stories further on that are the ripples.
Or Ricky, you can just twist down because it was a really good segment. You can just twist down it was for pebble,
Yeah.
and just like,
Sure.
because it was good as it was. It's just a little word pebble in there or stone.
Okay.
That's good.
It's access.
Ash, what is so funny? What's so funny? What are you watching?
He's watching a YouTube
My son does that too. He has headphones in and he's just like starts laughing. And I'm like always curious.
He wasn't laughing at you.
No,
It was
no.
what's on.
Probably very similar videos, just about different video games.
Yes,
YouTube.
excellent.
Do you want to?
I'll give it a shot.
Alright.
I'm not really clear, to be honest with you. Is the pebble a story? Or is the pebble the event? I think the pebble
Either
is.
way works.
Yeah, it is the pebble or stone is the story or event, right? We have to think.
But those aren't the same though, right? So
It's the story.
do we want to call it?
Ripples were stories. Ripples are the stories.
You see, this is
No, the ripples is the impact of telling the story over time, and it radiates out. And the more you tell it, the more it.
The pebble is the story.
Yeah.
that.
Okay.
That works.
It's the physical metaphor.
And when you drop that in to the water, it creates the ripples.
Now we don't have a story stack of stones
The seed
It's too bad.
or the.
Especially
That
if
didn't
it
work.
falls
That
to the
was like
bottom of the
mixing
pond
very
and springs
Photoshop.
up.
Oh, these are-
Springing up creates
Wow, these are
ripples.
glued in.
Let's just add more of that metaphor. Right.
I use the word grasshopper too.
That's where
Yeah.
Tom Cruise comes in.
So in ripples, the story, the event that occurs when someone connects with a human being, it really, from a metaphor perspective, that's the pebble. And when you drop that pebble in the water, as a story starts to radiate out and amplify out, that's what creates the culture of ripples. That was a real B- job right there.
So I think it's nice though. I mean, it begs the question for me, what is the water? Not that that's something we have to address,
Culture.
but when I hear that, yes, so I like that.
Yes.
It's like it
You're
offers no
impacting status quo by introducing, this event or this story, so that the pebble itself is the story. That associate who took the time to, brush the resident's hair, that's the story, and that pebble, when it gets dropped into the water, creates this ripple, and it creates, the culture that that is Watermark. And again, that's a story that's been creating a ripple for over 10 years now.
And each ripple is really a retelling. Every retelling creates another ring of ripples, yes.
Sure.
Sure.
If you want it to be, let's over metaphorize this thing.
Alright.
Is that enough to get?
Just one last piece, and then Aaron and Ricky, if you feel like it's there, then we don't have to. But when you were talking about the purpose is more the culture, it's to honor and celebrate. We don't have to teach, we don't have to train. I just thought if we could say it that it's really to inspire, it's to support, because we're kind of saying we're going to recruit, we're going to celebrate, we're going to honor everybody. But just you did mention it's slowing down throughout. I just didn't know if just in a nice little condensed version to talk about that while it's not to teach and train, there is some support that's going to happen. The program is to keep it alive, to inspire, to support, and encourage, and to remind people too, because sometimes we get complacent, and so the program can't just exist, with the celebration piece. Is there, and we'll talk about that this afternoon, but there is going to have to be small little training components. You don't have to use the T word, but it'll be reminders. It will be encouragement. So, just moving from that task orientation to that heart-centered approach, and so just all of that in a nutshell. I don't know if you feel like it's there or just.
No, I actually think it is. So
I got it. I got it.
Okay.
Here we go. You okay, Ricky? They got plenty of tape. And, so. Ripples in many ways is less about training, although there certainly is a training component to it. It really is a structure of honoring and celebrating these extraordinary associates that we work with that take the time to slow down their day, connect with a human being, and really be present there. So that's how I view ripples. I can do it again. You want a different swipe at it? Or?
For me, I think you make a really good point about, first of all, just packaging it in a short, brief way like that, but also to use the word structure. That's really helpful because it can come off, a lot of how we've been talking about it comes off as a very touchy-feely, this is our ethos kind of thing, but it doesn't say, no, there is an underpinning to this, there are actual structural supports to the program. So, but since we don't know what those are, do you feel like that effectively?
Yeah, the ripples. Well, yeah,
To
just
say
really,
there's a structure?
yeah, just really saying that the ripples program is meant to keep what everybody is
Doing naturally.
alive. Yeah,
Right.
exactly. So that's really what the program comes in. Is yes, people come in and we hire for that, but then you get busy, you get complacent, and so ripples is a reminder to always keep us operating our best and making those daily connections, whether it's day one or 3 years into your career. So that's what I just was trying to.
So would you say something like there's a structure that helps keep this program alive, something like that, but very brief.
Just the same thing.
So in many ways, Ripples is a structure to honor and celebrate the the extraordinary associates that work in our communities, and it's less about training and more about
Like the contagious spirit.
Ripples, in many ways, is a structure that is in a program that's less about training and more really about honoring and celebrating the spirit of the really extraordinary associates that we have in our communities. And what else did you want? Containing solutions.
I think that's enough if we put it all together. Do you feel like in the
I can say it one more time.
No, I mean, I think, because we've got at least 3 clips now of you integrating the word structure in there. We don't have to say what the structure is right now. That happens after this vision video. So just so that, the associates understand that it's not just so we like it when you're 90s, but there's a structure. And I feel like that we have really covered that, yeah.
But part of what it sounded like you guys were saying is that it's sort of self-perpetuating too, that like even after you've been here for a while, it sort of keeps lifting you up to higher performance to continue the Ripples program. I don't know, just by hearing the other stories.
Yeah,
That's what I heard
challenge
out of
issue.
them.
Yeah.
I don't know if you want to get that enough, but that's what I heard.
I like it.
Just gotta figure out how to say it.
Does it feel at all different from what you've been saying?
Yeah, there's a different component to it. So, in many ways, Ripples is more of an environment or a structure that celebrates and honors these extraordinary associates that have incredible stories to tell. And the more we share those stories and tell those stories, more it will inspire us to slow our day down and interact in a different way. It kind of feeds upon itself. It's like this, this environment that's constantly rippling out from these central stories. Little lost there at the end. All right.
I'm
Should we go have a working session video?